Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Lori Hanau, the founder and CEO of Global Roundtable Leadership. Thank you so much for joining us for episode 7 of our Roundtable Dialogue series for a very special conversation and one near and dear to my own heart that we're calling Reclaim Your Community and Build Healthy Ecosystems with Majora Carter, my soul sister, friend, colleague, and definitely a co-learner. Welcome, Majora.
Oh, Lori, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's a gift to have you. And I do want to take a minute to introduce you into my community, this community here. And just in case there's anyone that doesn't know, who you are. And so, Majora, you are a real estate developer. You have an urban revitalization strategy consulting company, and you work nationally while you are also deeply rooted and focused in your birthplace in Hunts Point in South Bronx in New York City. So everyone, Majora founded and led the nonprofit environmental justice solution organization Sustainable South Bronx from 2001, until when you entered the private sector around 2008. And Majora, you and I met around 2007, 2008. And that was also when you co-founded Green for All with Van Jones. And you are a MacArthur Fellow, a public radio host, and a Peabody Award-winning broadcaster. I love that you're the owner of Boogie Down Grind in the Bronx. I hope we get a chance to touch in on that. And if not, we'll definitely put the link into the videos at the end of this, our time together, so people can clue in there. That's a must, everybody. You're going to want to know about the Boogie Down Grind. And Majora is also responsible for the creation of numerous economic development, technology inclusion, and green infrastructure projects and policies and job training and placement systems, and is a lecturer at Princeton University's Keller Center. One thing, Majora, I did not know, and I was so moved by, is that you're quoted on the walls of the Smithsonian Museum of African American History and Culture in D.C. with a quote, "Nobody should have to move out of their neighborhood to live in a better one," which is also the subtitle of your 2022 book, Reclaiming Your Community, which I have right here. And we will also show and put a link in for where you can purchase this book at the end of our time together. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. It's so nice to see you. I'm like giddy just to be in your presence, virtually or not. I don't give a care. I'm just happy to be around you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I want to speak also in what I've known of you as we've walked together, to your bravery and to your integrity and to your perseverance and to how you inspire me to stay in my bravery and in my perseverance. So thank you.
Wow, that's high praise. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
And so first question is, what do you see and feel in your life and in this world that won't leave you alone? And in this way, can you share with us what you feel your calling is?
Well, fortunately, I do feel God's presence in my life. So that honestly kind of makes the other stuff that I feel a lot more palatable, because, I definitely am of the the feeling that, like, yes, I do have a calling, right? Like I really do feel that, the two big tenets of my faith: love God, love your neighbor. This is my ministry, the work that I do. But in the real world, this work is trying, and it can be soul crushing because the issues and the isms that we're dealing with are so hard. But my job is just to like show some value, show that our communities have value, and to bring value to them. And that is my calling, to create these types of projects that I hope make people feel as though their communities, and by association themselves within their community, are things that are wonderful and powerful and worthy of love and respect.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I'm just taking a breath there so people can really take that in. And so through your calling, how do you explain your current vision
Mhm.
and what called you to do this work that includes the writing of your book, Reclaiming Your Community?
You know, I grew up in the South Bronx while it was literally burning. Like the South Bronx was, I think, the poster child for urban blight in the early 70s and even into the 80s. Financial disinvestment, redlining, highway construction, all created this perfect sort of soup for things like landlords, to pay arsonists to burn down their buildings so they could collect insurance money, because our communities were redlined in such a way that there was no loans or mortgages or anything coming into these neighborhoods. And so the effect of all that was, as a kid, seeing my neighborhood, much of it burned down, neighbors like having to move out. There was between the drug wars that were happening in the neighborhood, and you saw the residual effect of all this, and it was just like, I want to grow up and get out of here. And as a smart kid, I was totally told that, like, literally, I was reading by the time I was 3. It was understood I was going to grow up and be somebody, and I was going to use education as my way out, and I did. Got myself into a great high school, and then Bronx High School of Science, and then college, Wesleyan University, and I only came back to my neighborhood. Well, I would come back occasionally because honestly, my mother's fried chicken and her cooking was just amazing. But
and being the youngest of 10, I'm yeah.
seriously, it was just like,
Yeah.
it really was the cooking.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but coming back home when I was starting graduate school and was broke and needed a cheap place to stay. It was mommy and daddy's house, but it was in this neighborhood I didn't want to be in. And it was only when I got to know my neighborhood, through the arts that was happening here. And I was like, oh my God, like there are people just like me here. This is great. And then discovered that the city and state were planning on building a huge waste facility on our waterfront. And then I found out later we had even more. And I thought, oh my God, like there's so much going on here. And it just so happens to be because we are a poor community of color and thus politically vulnerable. And I could not see that. I just couldn't. So that's when I realized I wanted to be a part of the change that we wanted to see in our community. And I really looked at environmental and then later on economic development as a way to support our communities.
And so what are we'll get into your book right after this question. But I feel like this question for me came first. Is what are the types of developments that you care to build? And it's as I seem to have a habit of doing, it's a multi-pronged question, and so answer whichever parts most resonate with you. But what is the type of work you want to be doing? You've touched on that already, and we'll go into that more, I know. And what are the models you want to create? And so maybe it's what are the types of developments you care to build, and what are the models you want to create?
Sure. So it's interesting because again, I wasn't alone in being like one of the bright kids being told like, oh, you got to grow up and get out of here. It's brain drain. That's what happens, and it's not just in the developing world. It's in places like the South Bronx, or Native American reservations, or poor white towns, where there was industry but doesn't exist anymore. But the whole thing is that kids measure success by how far they get away from those neighborhoods. And when we did our market research, and which came in the form of surveys and focus groups and asking folks, well, what are you looking for in the neighborhood that you desire? Because for the most part, this wasn't it. We realized that people were leaving for were not like that. What they weren't saying they hated the neighborhood. Da, da, da. It was mostly there was nothing to do, nothing to do,
Mm.
and so they were just like, how about? And so they would leave to go to other neighborhoods where there were restaurants and coffee shops and bars and bookstores and just things that occupy your time, that created what we call in urban planning third spaces, that are neither work nor home, but places where you can build communities and connection. And so I was like, yeah, they're right. Like the biggest, like, public spaces on our quote unquote main street in our community are the waiting rooms inside of health clinics.
Mm.
Like, who wants that? I mean, come on. So we decided that what we would start to do, because like I didn't, I started, as a developer with not understanding really how the world works. And so I just poured all of our money, into creating some of these spaces. And we started with a little cafe that was actually a joint venture at first with a really amazing coffee shop called Birch Coffee. And there's some of the best in New York City, by the way. We still use their coffee. But then we separated off and became the Boogie Down Grind, which was more, I think, more culturally what we were, because Boogie Down is the name of the South Bronx, for those of you who don't know, and it's also the birthplace of hip hop. And so the Boogie Down Grind is essentially sort of like an homage, to hip hop, and in particular the early days of it, and just the impact that it had on our culture. So building that space like that actually allowed for our community to come in and show what they can do, whether it was open mics or poetry readings or art exhibits, or even just like honestly credit repair workshops. These are things that were organized by people within the community, but they needed a place to do it. And it was a really, when we understood that, and we call that kind of stuff lifestyle infrastructure, which is just as important as water and, infrastructure and all those other types of things. But it really helps like create a sense of community. Like there's things that you hold dear because you're in relation to other people, but you need those places, because community, it's not just a place, it's an activity. But whether it's a positive or negative activity, honestly, or whether there's activity at all, is dependent upon the type and the quality of spaces in which you build for this to happen. So that's just one small example of it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And to me, again, I love the, the kind of the lifestyle language is actually, for me, gets at the soul and the spirit and
Yeah.
and the heart and even the bones of the community. What brings us alive together, where we make
Yeah,
meaning, how
totally.
we build relationship, and how we leave the transactional. Like
Mm,
for me, there's a way that you understand so deeply and are so committed to the relational, and that you're bringing that alive through your work,
hmm.
and the community building and through real estate development and just everything you're about, everything you've done along the way.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know
Thank you.
yeah, yeah,
It is about
absolutely.
reclaiming even just the phrase real estate developer, um, because it's just, I think it's just been so, it's just fraught, almost as bad as gentrification itself, where it's just like people just have a reaction to it and it's like, oh, it must be bad. And it's just like, well, it's real estate, it's land, it's what you do with it. And I think reclaiming even that language can be helpful to folks as they go, like, but we can determine like what we consider to be good development, or the kind that's good, or the kind that's going to be nurturing and healing, or the kind that's going to perpetuate like all the isms that we don't want to, have to continue to live in. And I veer on the other side of using it.
Yes, you do. And I feel like this is really the story of my life and my own soul calling
Mm,
too. Is you know, our work here at Global Roundtable Leadership is all about how teams work together to become
hmm
ensembles, like wherever they are, whether it's in for-profits or not-for-profits, or community development work and teaming there, or collective impact work, all around the world. Like, how are we working together, and
mm,
how are we sharing power? How are
yes.
we sharing leadership? How are we sharing in a way that builds relationship? And I know we'll continue to thread this through our whole conversation, because this is
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
I feel we both, really recognize each other, if you
Yeah.
if you will.
And it's lovely that you talk about sharing leadership, because it really is sharing power. It's like, one of the things that another thing that I think is really, interesting about this, the work that I do and others like me do, is that this and none it would be nothing if it didn't come from a place of sharing as well. Like, my community really had to share with me what was valuable to them in order for me to actually like put meat on those bones. And then we really, and so I think from the start it was already shared, even though I feel like there are folks who are just like, okay, you lead this, and I was like, yeah, I did. And that's a lot of the times it does involve one person going, okay, we're gonna do this. That's fine, and I have often been in that situation. But you realize that once as it's being built, and even that process is a group effort, whether or not people want to acknowledge it. I mean, I feel like, I hope I do. um you realize it, just like how much of it, is this collaborative effort. And so of course you're sharing power. It's just like, I'm a big dreamer, but I feel like all of my dreams honestly have gotten better when they were released out of my head, and then sort of put in front of others to actually help like season it a bit. Um,
Right?
I just love that. It also takes
Yeah.
the pressure off, I think, a little bit
Right.
anyway.
Well, it's interesting because throughout the 23 years that I've been focused in this work, when I'm speaking to like the founder or the CEO or the executive director or like that, where the hierarchy and the
Mhm.
way we're currently structured begins, if you will, so many times everyone, including that person and including then that like executive leadership team, feels caught.
Mm,
And it's how do we, like you're saying, standing for reclaiming, how do we reclaim leadership and the power of individuality
mhm.
along with the power of community and the
Right.
power of teaming, in this way? And that, you know that it's, why isn't everyone, even within the work, valued and seen collectively? We've habituated and conformed to such individuality that I kept feeling like, even how often you bring James into the book, like, and where you honor your beloved, and his epiphanies with the train station, like all the things, like all the stories. And so, I want to take this into your book, through the framing of your book. And for those that may just be joining, reclaiming your community. And something that I forgot to say is, for those of you that are here with us now, thank you for being here with us, in person, in the present moment. And please, at any time, we will do our best to make time for Q&A. But as we love to do it here, we want to walk our talk on the inclusion, which means bringing your voices in now with us and threading them in and weaving them in along the way, and that your questions may then impact. I'll let go of my questions, and they impact where we go. And so please use the chat. But I do want to talk about your book right now, and the subtitle. You don't have to move out of your community to live in a better one.
Yeah.
And I want to name first and foremost that I so appreciate you as a storyteller. Always have. And this book is just so great for all the different forms of storytelling. and how you take us with your story braided throughout, um, from the cultural norms and status quo of real estate development, as you just
Mhm.
touched on, and community development and wealth creation, which includes, as you've touched on, the brain drains, also white supremacy,
Mhm.
gentrification, and poverty economic maintenance. And you take us through the book in really, really thorough, descriptive ways into a third type of real estate development, talent retention.
Mhm.
And again, this reclaiming of this for community, and that you use employee retention models. And then I'm just going to say a couple more things about the thread of the book, is that then you take us into real life examples that form a new narrative. And I think that's maybe chapter 18,
Mhm.
that where you literally call it, a new narrative. And then you even offer us a Reclaiming Your Community discussion guide at the end, with great questions that we can have conversations about, with each other in our communities. And
Mhm.
so I just want to ask you, what do you want to say about your book and any of the parts I've named, or anything else?
Yeah, I mean, look, when I first started working on this, my publisher was like, "Look, you want a title just to so that if people do not even crack open your book, they'll get it." And it is literally that we can work to create the kind of communities that really meet our social, spiritual, economic, and environmental needs and desires from within. Do we acknowledge that there's all sorts of outside rules, regulations, white supremacy, blah blah blah, that literally created the way that low status communities actually functionally operate right now? Yes. Are there hurdles? Yes, to making the community of your dreams. But is it possible? Yeah. And that's what this is. That's what it's about. I really just want people to feel as though like we do have agency in deciding that our communities are not valueless, because that I
Ooh.
do believe is the way that we sort of look at them, and which is one of the reasons why it's so easy and why we're so vulnerable. Low status communities in particular are so vulnerable to outside pressures, coming in and either, making it so that our neighborhoods gentrify or become the or stay in sort of like a poverty level economic, sort of malaise. And I think that's the crux of what I want people to believe, because I feel like, before gentrification, starts to happen, or when we see the outward signs of it, it has happened long before. And that's when people from communities like ours really do believe that there's no value there.
Yeah.
And that's what I want people to get out
Yeah.
of it. It's just like,
Yeah.
no, that's not true. You are valuable. Our communities are, and we should act accordingly, like in the moment. Like, yeah, the best time to have dealt with all this stuff that I talk about in my book, well, yeah, it would have been like, 20, 30 years ago. Second best time is right now. So I'm not
Boom.
saying it's not hard. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, right. And something that I say when people are like, you're working on, with teams on sharing power, and you got to stick in. This isn't the work of a week. This is the work of a lifetime. And isn't it hard? Like, and I'm like, well, yes, but what isn't? Like,
Yeah.
if we're living in this earth, like, what isn't hard? And when I'm looking at my legs on my deathbed, I want to be pleased with the path I took. And so if I'm going to have a hard path, I want to have, respect and care to have, had some kind of positive impact.
Yeah.
Let's get over the, I mean, I don't want to diminish the hard. I want to say that. I'm not saying that to diminish the hard, but I also don't want to have the hard keep us from sticking in.
Yes. And I heard, actually, I was at the Clinton Global Initiative for a couple of days, just a few days ago, and in Bill Clinton's opening remarks, I'm going to paraphrase it, but it was basically like, we're here. It's like they match people who want to commit to doing something great in the world with people who can actually help them do it. And now I think I've frozen. Okay, I'm back. Oh, there it goes. And he said, something like, we do this stuff because we actually believe that we have the capacity to make the world a better in the future than it is right now.
Hmm.
And it's so simple, but it's true. And then the other part, was just like, and now we have to steel ourselves for, the work ahead. But I also want to remind people is that if we understand that every little bit of change that you make is worth celebrating, oh my God,
Oh my
that's the
gosh.
best part. And it's
Thank you
just
for bringing
like,
that in.
I mean, I cannot tell you. I mean, actually, I'm sure people there that know exactly how I feel, and you do too, Lori. I know you do. But when you see like the change, like of either a physical change or like an attitude change in a person who's just like, you know what, I do see things differently. Or wait a second, now my kid, is doing these things in our own neighborhood, or I'm being able to like, frankly, go out and have a drink at a nice place in my neighborhood, or I can see an awesome band in my neighborhood, or whatever. And I never thought I'd be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's like, I don't care if they have any idea who's behind it. I do not care. As a
Yeah.
matter of fact, one of my favorite things to do is like to go to some of my projects and like sit and listen to people talk about it. Just because they have no idea who I am or what I've done to like bleed into this work. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
But it's also, that's why I really do it. Because you
Yeah.
forget the hard stuff.
The fulfillment.
It's
Well,
amazing.
well, and honestly, in a way, the fulfillment that comes through, even the sweat and the tears and the nail biting months and years, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. I think that this is where our substance resides. It's, you are not a person who skates the surface, woman. This is this is, and we as humans, this is a part of our deep substance, and we have questions and comments
Oh,
pouring in here. So I'm going to turn to these.
okay.
And so Veronica, we start with a statement, and so I do love again an offer
Mm.
here, like questions, and also just somebody that wants to speak their voice. Is Veronica is this is funny because my chat's not letting me rise up. Here we go. Veronica posted, I resonate so deeply. um Hang on, it keeps jumping back up on my
I know.
screen. Are you having that happen to you? Hey,
I can't even.
Sebastian, can
Yeah.
you read the question? Can you read Veronica's statement
Oh, but
for
then she
us?
also it keeps jumping to her question afterwards.
Right?
So want to just go
Yeah.
to the question and then maybe we can
Um.
try to do that.
Yeah. She did say. Hang on, I'm a stubborn woman. I just want to see it. No, I can't get there. So let me go to Veronica's question, and then Philippe has a question. Jeanette has a question.
Uh-huh.
So Veronica's question, and I know she said that she was resonating with growing up in a poor community. All you've been told is how to leave and get out, but no one focuses on reclaiming your community.
Mm-hmm.
Sebastian, thank you for reposting. And
Thanks.
then Veronica's question is, how do you respond to people that say it's too late to change
Mm.
things? My community is going through lots of gentrification, and people are being bought out of their homes, and public education is severely underfunded. So hope is largely non-existent amongst my peers.
I know. And that's and I hear you and feel you. I mean, believe me, I hear that from people in my own community all the time, Veronica. But I also, know, and this is where you do have to depend on the other ones who aren't saying that. And you really do have to focus on the folks who actually can have as much of a vision as you do, even if it's like a tiny, tiny little bit, because that I swear will help you just like feel as though you're not insane, because that's half the battle as well. Because it's like, I honestly, from some of my earliest work, I was just like, no, we have to like build projects so people can see that things change. And some of my earliest peers were just like, uh-huh, yeah, you go do that. And because we're not helping. And they didn't, but there were others who would show up. And it was, and when it was actually all done, then it was just like grudging, like, I don't even know if it was respect, but it was like an acknowledgement. Let's put it that way. But you know what? it was done, and folks really were excited by this stuff. And you just have to think of it that way. But I do want to address really quickly, because you mentioned that people are being bought out of their homes. That is something that we have got to address. I mean, between private equity real estate firms, and smaller holding companies that are taking full advantage of the fact that people in our communities, again, I'll say it again because I can't say it often enough. Gentrification doesn't start happening when you start seeing stuff like that. It happened long before, when people didn't see any value in it. So why are we surprised when folks will sell the homes out from underneath them? Because it's just like most of them are looking and going, wait, somebody wants to buy this crap in this here neighborhood? Because we don't feel that there's value. And why do we not feel that there's value in our community? Because we've been led to believe that our communities really don't have value while we're in them. That is like the unfortunately the status. And that's why we call communities low status, because there's like inequality is assumed by people both inside and outside of those neighborhoods. And so if we believe it on the inside that our communities have less value, the folks on the outside know that and will therefore buy the homes early and cheap, because chances are the folks in your neighborhood, just like folks in ours and all nationally, are not being paid a fair market value for their homes.
Yeah.
So if there's anything you can do, to keep people from, or help people understand that generational wealth is something that can really help people, but you have to hold on to it. You have to hold on to it. And that's where, we're actually starting to try to understand more about how do we get more into like the legislative piece around protecting people who have been led to believe in their own communities because there aren't any protections for small homeowners. There just isn't.
Yeah.
It all falls on the side of developers.
Right. And the systems change and the different aspects, the multidimensionality of systems change. And Veronica, what you're asking, what Majora is calling you to, is to do not underestimate the power of your own inspiration and staying heartened and community building. Because I'm just with what Majora is naming, I'm thinking of what, with some people that I know in Lahaina, in Hawaii and on Maui, and the fires have burned, that historical community, and the indigenous elders are calling everyone to remember their culture, to protect their culture, to not sell to the real estate developers who are coming in and offering, and to remember the culture, remember the community. And so at all the levels of community building, matters so much, even when we don't necessarily see that they do. And so anything you can do to be that spark and stay that spark always,
yes,
Veronica, and all of us. And which brings me to Philippe Chaunier. And hello, Philippe. I'm blowing you kisses. My soul brother, thank you for being here with us. He's co-founder of Onika. He and Stacy, his wife, Majora, are doing incredible regenerative work outside of Quebec. And his question is, what would be the number one thing for community building?
Gosh, that's a loaded question. Because I think first things first is someone's there needs to be an understanding that there's a community to build or rebuild, depending on the state that it's in. But ultimately is that it belongs, to the people that are in it already. Because if you don't have that, then again, it's just much easier for folks whose interests are not aligned, with community building, to come and decide what building that community means, which is generally not in line, with benefiting the people that are in those neighborhoods. So, but I also think coming up with, and it doesn't have to be a fully baked plan by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think that people have to have a vision for the future, and and being able to name that and claim it as something that could happen is so important. Because, like, to Lori's point about inspiring folks to think about their community differently. I mean, if people are just like dejected all the time, and frankly, in many cases, rightfully so. Rightfully so. So I'm not going to discount the trauma and the drama that, living in a low status community often does to people's existence. I still feel it in my neighborhood, despite the fact that there's some amazing things going on. It's like you still see that we still fall prey, to it, the idea that low status communities, can take a lot more of the kind of things that other higher status communities don't ever have to deal with. We see it all the time. And it's problematic, but we also know that you have to sort of like hold inside yourself and then bring it out to folks, that there is something so beautiful about wanting more for your community. And it's okay. It's not even just okay. It is, you have to want more for your community.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm so done with this idea that, like, oh, when a neighborhood gets too nice, that means it's not for us. Like, what kind of psychotic stuff is that? Like, seriously, like, oh, this is too nice for this neighborhood.
Right. Right.
We need to check that. We need
Right.
to check that and then
Right.
dismiss it and then like work and build some great stuff.
Yes. And again, we cannot underestimate the power of our conformity. And that is a conformed statement, that someone is living in through their conformity and is not in their wholeness and in the
Nope.
quality of connection and the genius of our diversity and the genius
Mm-hmm.
of health, the commitment to all of us in health and
Yep.
wellness everywhere.
Yep.
We've had the privilege of working with an Indigenous tribe in Canada, Reconciliation Canada, and their organization, and Chief Joseph and their tribe has a word called Numoyat,
Mm.
and I love it. It's similar to Ubuntu, but and MLK quoted this in his own way too. Is I cannot be who I am until you are who you are.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
cannot be who I am until you are who you are. And this is another aspect of reclaiming our
Yes.
humanity and
Uh-huh.
reclaiming community and connection, and why we're doing the systems change work that we're doing. Philippe also says, thank you for offering this nourishing conversation.
Thank you.
And Jeanette Edgecombe is here, and I and the GRTL team has the great privilege of having had Jeanette come and work with us as our VA, a virtual assistant. Oh my gosh, we're never letting her go. We're never letting you go, Jeanette. But Jeanette's question, welcome, Jeanette, is how do we reclaim our communities for our youth and elderly when we have major pushback from the local elected officials, such as the mayor and common council? These elected officials that give the greatest pushback look like us, but do not, sorry, it's bouncing again, the chat's bouncing, but do not look out for the best interest of their constituents and their voters. Do you have anything to offer there?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, it is truly, I do. It's painful to hear things like that because they are a part of what we do, and that's why it is super important, for folks to really be voting in real ways. Like, I'm not sure if you're from here or where you're from, Jeanette.
Wisconsin moving to
Oh,
Tennessee.
oh wow, okay.
Next month.
Yes, okay. So definitely here we hear this unfortunately a lot. Um, we do have to be voting more. We do have to be advocating a lot more. And what I have seen, and even and especially on the local level, when you start, like, I'll give you an example. Like, we've had like my company or getting pushback from like our local community advisory board, which is the first access to government. They're not technically government, but they kind of act like they do and have like try to like do power plays, and so again, the work that we do is actually not the status quo kind of development. And I've ruffled the feathers of some people, and I'm going to continue to do so. But we had to, and doing the work sometimes is really obviously really hard. We've been talking about that, but there are some folks who wanted to block us getting a liquor license just because it's frankly adults. It is an adult place. It's not like a little teen club. It's not a community center. And frankly, adults, if they want to drink, they can have a drink. But it's also a way that's a good way for us to make money. It's just like it's a fantastic, we need a nice place like that in the neighborhood, and you need to have a liquor license, but you have to have a liquor license in order to sell. And they've done everything they could to block us. And it just got to the point where I had to appeal to the folks who love what we do. And it was the first time I ever like socialized it in my business capacity, and just said to, folks on social media, like, this is what's happening. I need your help. Like, show up at this hearing so that folks understand. And I don't know what I was expecting, but like 30 people showed up at a meeting that never has any public participation. and it was just like,
Woo!
they
Right.
were, I mean, the little community board was just like, what just happened here? And even though they still tried, there was no way they were going to let us go out of that room without like moving forward in the process. No way. And I feel like those type of moments, that's when we have the capacity to actually impact the change that we need to see. It may seem like a really small thing, but it's not, considering that it literally like pushes the agenda of what people in the community want to see. And so that's where I feel like we have to also like pay attention to like how local projects are being viewed, because it is that little foundation right at the local level that will be the difference between what you see, and what if is are you seeing the kind of things that you want to see in a community or not. Like, it didn't have to go to like all the elected officials. It was just like the buck stops right here, and people
Right.
showed who they were. So I thought
and
that was
and
really
showed
interesting.
up. They
Hmm.
showed up, and this
Yeah.
is also a part of sharing power and
Yeah.
responsibility and
Hmm.
meaning. Is the showing up, as you're saying, showing up through voting, showing up in these moments beyond your even your current
Yeah.
imagination, like people
Totally.
people showing up. Scott Edward Anderson, hello, dear Scott. He's got a question, and I think it may be a nice way to close, but I
Hmm.
cannot close us where I can't believe how fast the time is going.
I know.
But I know it's crazy. But I feel like I just I feel like this question is also so important because when I say to people who are, deep in the trenches doing their work, showing up through
Hmm.
thick and thin, and I say, like, you've got to keep yourself in the hoop. You've got to keep your health and wellness. When they ask me what that means, I'll say you've got to keep yourself included. And
Yeah.
Majora, you speak to this so beautifully in your book, and when you went to Robbie Gass's, and Rachel
Oh,
Bagby
Brooklyn. Hmm.
to Rockwood, and Rachel, who's a soul sister, another soul sister, but right, I mean, right, whoa! But when she sang the sacred song and what it did to crack you open, and then through the thread, how you've taken on your health and well-being, you share that story in a couple of different ways,
Yeah.
and I just want to ask you, um, when you've had, like, can we talk about the pain of the attacks? So, like, not
Mm.
only how to stay healthy doing the hard work, but when we put ourselves out into the public, and there's the pain of the years of attacks from groups, blacklisted protests, how have you endured? um who and what have you drawn on? You mentioned God, so I want to bring God back in right here and right now at the top. If anybody wasn't with us, you mentioned the strength you receive through God. And how have you handled the attacks? How have you stayed in it? How have you stayed strong? What keeps you healthy? Anything in that you want to speak to?
Yeah. Well, oh God. I mean, it's so, just to go back to some of the things that I talked about in the book, which was that, I worked myself into the hospital not once but twice, and just not taking care of like all the signs that my body was literally screaming at me, and just refused to listen. Um, and it happened two times. So the third time it started to happen, I was just, and I realized that it was the stress of the work, because even though, I loved what I did, it takes a toll, because I wasn't eating right. I was definitely not exercising. Spiritually, I was a hot mess as well. and I think we're always, unless you actively work at doing those things. And I feel
Ooh.
like I've absolutely done that, the hard work, even though it's a constant that you have to replenish like every single day. Otherwise it like the worst parts of our mind, we will just like always come forward if we don't
Mm.
like take
Yeah.
care. So staying in the word of God, like working out, like trying to monitor what I eat, because that's like my drug, to be honest. Um, and I like sweets and salt, so it's just like it's really bad. But that's the thing. It's like if you're not take, you do have to take care of yourself, and knowing. And I did a devotional the other day, and I can't remember the exact scripture, but it kind of was all about just like refusing to worry because God has it, and how it just sort of like made me go, this is, I mean, I can do the work, but it's really not my fight. Like it's going to be done. Right.
Ooh.
But that's
Ooh.
even just that kind of
Ooh.
feeling, um,
Yeah.
was just like mind boggling and wonderfully, liberating to me. Cause I was like, I'm not doing anything. I'm just doing, what I do, but ultimately it's a plan that I know is going to work out because I'm really working hard to make it happen. But
Mm.
really I'm not the one in control. And that was liberating. I hope somebody can appreciate that. Um, but but I think it's also kind of related to Scott's question. Hello, Scott. Which is about the Greenway. And seeing projects that I literally, did start and
And,
with.
and and Majora, you know what I'm going to do? Excuse me for interrupting, but I'm going to read the question for those that may
Oh,
listen
oh,
later.
okay,
That along with here. And
okay.
so you started the waterfront restoration in the Bronx in the early 2000s, specifically with Hunts Point, Riverside Park, which has grown into the South Bronx Greenway.
Hmm.
How does it feel to see something you initiated grow into something much larger than you imagined, or did you imagine it?
I did imagine it. I mean, that's the thing. It was just like, man, I would be talking to people as if it was already done. As if it was already done. And I do
There's
remember like
wisdom.
some hilarious report, like there's a gentleman named Guy Trebay, who was a big reporter for the Village Voice, like back in the day. And he actually, and it was a big deal to get him to come up to the Bronx because nothing like that ever happened. And I was there with a colleague, and we're just like painting this picture about how amazing it was. The Hunts Point Riverside Park was literally still a dump. I mean, there was nothing about this place that screamed waterfront park. It was just like nasty. And but I was just like, yeah, and there's a tidal river, and there's gonna be a water park over here, and it's gonna be a sunning mound here, and blah, blah, blah. And he was just like, and I was like, can you see it? And he was like, no. Absolutely not. And but it was just like, I was like, okay, you will soon. And same thing with the Greenway. I was just like, we're gonna, I see this is just like the beginning, this little park. And now it's a national award winning park. Just one of the, like literally one of my crown jewels. And the starting of the Greenway was also just like, no, we need to be connected to the rest of the Greenway, that runs along the entire East Coast. It bypasses the Bronx. We need to be connected. And by hook or by crook, we're going to make it happen. And it was just like constantly talking to people, not having an idea about how to make it happen, but know that it needed to happen.
Mm.
And just being that vocal. And I'm sure people were just thought I was the most hilarious thing. Like, who is this black chick coming to these like state transportation meetings and talking about some like greenway that does not exist? And then after a while, folks were, I remember Ed Nickens, who was working for the Metropolitan Transportation Coordinating Council, was just like, there actually is this federal transportation. You should apply. And I was just like, a what? But I was like, okay. And I figured it out. And that was that. And then suddenly, first phase projects is like $50 million that, built, some different waterfront parks in like the first phase of the Greenway. We're not done. We need a lot more to finish it, and to maintain it. But yeah, it's like, it started with like some crazy chick going, what I see something, and convincing others that it was worth paying attention to. So how does it
Yeah.
make me feel, Scott? Amazing. And but even more amazing is that other folks have actually looked at that kind of stuff and realized that they could do it too. That's what makes me even more happy because, I just spark some stuff. That's all.
That's the collective. You're returning to the collective. And again, like this, why I asked you at the top, Scott, thank you for those questions and everyone who's put in questions or comments. And there's one here from Catherine we'll get to also. But Majora, it's why I did ask you at the top about your call,
Mm-hmm.
a spiritual call and your visioning, and how do we normalize our spirituality in with our minds and our
Mm-hmm.
emotionality and our physical bodies into wholeness? Like
Mm-hmm.
how do we normalize the receiving of visions and our sight and trusting them and trusting ourselves along with a larger universal mystery and
Mm-hmm.
spirit and claiming these visions that come to us again, even when it's hard, and stick in with them. And so just really want to encourage all of you out there, to trust yourselves and trust your
Mm-hmm.
visions and trust how much you matter and trust what you offer this precious, hard and remarkable world, and Catherine, oh my gosh, I don't know this blessing woman, but I'm thanking you up front, and I hope I pronounced your name properly. Catherine Lucier um, is saying this is mind blowing, right? You are both stunning. Your beliefs, your words, you radiate possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Bravo. Well, thank you
Yes.
too, Catherine,
Thank you.
and yes, and Majora. Thank you. Thank you, blessing woman. Thank you. Thank you for this time. Thank you for your personhood. Thank you for your kinship. And
Amen.
yes, to be continued.
Thank
To be
you.
continued. Yeah. Yeah. And first hug from you when you get home, and second one from me to James, if you would.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. Got it.
Thank you. And may this time here, Majora, and may the people who have shown up here that we know and that we don't know, and how this
Mm-hmm.
trickles out into the world, come back to you a thousandfold, and all that you're about, and all that you care to show up for, and may it continue to nourish you, both in your bravery and your vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
Just so much respect and love to you.
I take that as a prayer. Thank
Mm,
you.
mm.
Thank you.
Yes,
I could listen
good,
to you
good.
forever, Lori. Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
oh,
Thank
well,
you.
oh, thank you. And I feel like I'm channeling, honestly, like not only my spirit and my words, but my team's. Like my
Uh,
team was so excited for today and has such respect for you. Again, I just want you to know you're imbued by all of us,
okay.
all of us. And okay, oh my goodness. So I want to follow through on this before we close out at the top of the hour. And so we will post where you can find Majora's new book, Reclaiming Your Community. You don't have to move out of your neighborhood to live in a better one, in the chat box. And if this is the first time, and Jules, I know you said somewhere, and I think I cut off the note, but about the boogie down grind. I know you're
Oh,
going to put that in chat, and I know you're putting in on chat on the Majora Carter group.
right.
And so we're putting all that information in chat. And then if this is your first time joining us, we here at Global Roundtable Leadership hope you'll listen to the first 6 episodes of the Roundtable Dialogue that included another sister of Majora's Raw Goddess, and the first one for the Great Leadership Awakening, and Joel Solomon and Carol Sanford and Chief Joseph and the Masiello group and Eugene
Mm,
Newman. So there's a richness there of different themes all around how we can share and build together. And 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 yes, I think that is it. Majora, is there anything you want to say to everyone as we close here?
I just want to say thank you for being here, and yes, please enjoy my book. It really is, I think, the kind of thing, if whether you're from a low status community or not, but understanding a little bit of the story, because again, it's not an academic read. Like you can get through it real fast, but I think it does give some
Storytelling.
insights in terms of like how people, from these communities and our communities really can also be a part of it. But it also will give you, especially if you're not from a low status community, an opportunity to sort of see like how also you can help as well. So thank you.
Yeah. Here's to our wholeness in that, and to all the very practical, stories and ideas that you offer. Thank you,
Mhm.
everyone. Thank you for being with us. Our best in all directions. Bye for
Thank you.
now, and see you in November.
Blessings.